Hey folks, BlackCross here, and welcome to a State of Play Aftermath Overthought view of 2022. And I have to say, before we go into like the stuff that interests me the most and stuff, I want to talk about the progression of State of Play that Sony has been doing thus far. You know, when we first saw State of Play, it was kind of standardized and stuff like that. But I feel like in terms of presentation, they've gotten a little bit better each time. It seems like Sony knows where to gear their stuff towards, like what stuff they need to show off and what stuff people want to see and stuff like that. They have this genuine ideal, and they have a better ideal of how to present. I'm getting so tongue twist right now. How to present it. That's the word. That's the word I was trying to say. They know how to present it better. So I have to say, in terms of State of Play, they've gotten better over the years. But in terms of like the selection of games, I'm sure for a lot of people, the answer is yes, they've gotten better. But for me, it's still kind of half and half. Like, you know, half the stuff I have interest in, and the other half I don't really have that much interest. I mean, you guys know what type of stuff I get into and stuff like that, and everything like that, you know. So, but yeah, but it's also obvious, ever since like halfway through the State of Plays that we have seen thus far, and they have stated this multiple times, in fact, Sony has mentioned this multiple times, they want to invest in VR. And you know, it's funny because in the previous generation, and I'll explain that in a little bit, but in the previous generation of VR, they have stated that they wanted to gear towards VR. And they have slowly done that over time, but not heavily and mythfully. Now, with this VR2 coming out, they're now putting every source of resources they have, and they're putting it into VR. I mean, there's a lot of games that's going to be coming out for VR. There's the Resident Evil Village that's going to get a VR thing. Horizon is getting one. No Man's Sky is. So it's like, they're really pushing VR right now for this next generation of VR. Would I get a VR 2? Not really. And I'm not saying that, you know, I don't have any interest or anything like that. There's a handful of games that I would get for like the regular VR, but at the same time, it's just for those handful of games that I have interest in. Another thing too that I also want to mention, they're slowly, progressively talking about more exclusivities towards the PS5. Now, for a lot of people, they may not be aware of, but for the past couple of years since COVID happened, we've been kind of slowly getting into the PS5 stage, and Sony has been careful about trying to release games exclusively to PS5. There have been some games that people have been talking about it being released for PS5, but they're also available for the PS4 as well. A lot of people forget that the Spider-Man Miles Morales was released for PS4 as well as Kena Bridge of Spirits. Both were available for the PlayStation 5. Some people forget that. Now, there are a handful of games that are available for the PlayStation 5 exclusively, like the Demon's Souls Remake, Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart, Returnal, so on and so forth, but not a whole lot. But right now, from this State of Play alone, it's possible that they're finally transitioning more from both PS4 and PS5 and are slowly putting it exclusively as a PS5 games. The first one, and one that has been talked about, I should have saw coming, but I was still surprised nonetheless, and that is Resident Evil 4. I honestly should have suspected Resident Evil 4 Remake to happen, you know? The fact that they had done 1, 2, and 3, and they have been talking about doing Resident Evil 4 Remake. So, why was I surprised? Probably for the same reason I would be surprised if a Kingdom Hearts remake was to ever happen. one would argue and say, should there be a remake of this game? You know, should there be a remake? For a handful of people, the answer would obviously probably be yes, but for some others, some would argue and say they would fear that it would ruin the original. Maybe not so much as, like, prevent it from being playable, but they would look at Resident Evil 4 and be like, no, the original one did better in this area, and then the remake changed too much to where it became unrecognizable. It looks like the same stuff is going on, but again, from what we're seeing thus far at face value, it's not a lot to go off of. We're getting literally the first 2 hours of the game, probably, in terms of, like, where in the story of Resident Evil 4. Really, honestly, I can't say for sure I'm 100% hyped for this, but I would still be interested to play it nonetheless. For those that don't know, I love Resident Evil 4. It is a good game. I have never really played many of the other Resident Evil games, and I should, but I'm a little bit of a chicken shit when it comes down to it. I mean, yes, I have hopped on to Fatal Frame 1, 2, and 3 and all that stuff, but I have really not been that excited to hop into another horror survivor game, mostly because I don't like the idea of being terrified to death. You know what I mean? It's just one of those things. But Resident Evil 4 does look good. It does give me hope that it'll be good. But at the same time, because of how I remember the original Resident Evil 4, I don't know if the remake will carry through and it will be better or not. You know what I mean? It's going to be interesting when it comes out. The next game that I'm actually excited for is going to be available for both PS4 and PS5, and is one we've been informed of for a long while, and that is Stray. Stray, for those that aren't familiar with, Stray is basically a game where you play as a cat. And that's all you're doing. You're playing as a cat. You're roaming around this cyberpunk world through the cat's eye. You're just kind of exploring as a cat. And it's one of those things where it's like, at first glance you look at it and you go, okay, interesting synopsis. Kind of weird, but I get the ideal. But now, here we are, literally next month, it's going to be available to play, and it looks amazing. Like, in all honesty, if I wasn't hyped for Stray before, I am now. Something else that happened during this state of play, something came up, and on the one hand, it's good. It gets me excited, and it's good to see that this game is going to be coming out for PS4 and PS5. On the other hand, though, I'm a little bit concerned for another company that was originally having this as an exclusive title. For those that don't know, the game is called Tunic, and this game was first shown through Microsoft. It looked fun. It was basically a Legend of Zelda game, but the fox is a main character and stuff like that. It looked pretty fun. However, though, it was supposed to be exclusively released under the Microsoft brand. Now, here we are, a few months after its release, and it's going to be coming out for the PS4 and PS5 in September. That has me kinda concerned. Not to say that I'm disappointed, no, I'm glad that means I can play this game. But at the same time, it's like, Microsoft doesn't have any exclusives still. Like, didn't they buy all these companies specifically to make exclusive games for the system? And as far as I know, I may be wrong, they haven't really announced many of them. Hopefully they will, but I hadn't heard anything else aside from the new Halo game that's supposed to be exclusive for the Xbox system. Obviously they bought Bethesda and stuff like that, so that makes sense, but at the same time, there's not much conversation going on with it, is there? I mean, again, I could be wrong. They haven't really mentioned much of it. I'm just kind of surprised that Tunic is getting released for the PlayStation system as well, you know? It's just kind of weird. Alright, I've stalled for long enough, guys. You want to know my biggest and my most important thoughts on the one game that everyone's wanting to know. What do I think now of Final Fantasy 16? And I have to say, if I wasn't hyped for 16 before, I am now. Like, I mean, I was interested in the game whenever it was first revealed and stuff like that. But because I wasn't for sure what was going on and stuff like that, I wasn't 100% on board, obviously, you know? I had an ideal synopsis. I'm like, okay, so it's kind of like almost a Final Fantasy meets The Witcher in a way, which I love The Witcher. I haven't played the first and second one, but I love The Witcher 3. That was a really good game. I absolutely love it. And if this becomes like The Witcher 3 in a way, then it could be good. It could be good. I was interested to see where the gameplay goes from here because, again, that last trailer we saw a brief moment of gameplay, and it wasn't really a good indication of what was going on. Here we are now, 2022, we finally see a new trailer for Final Fantasy 16. And again, the problem is that the gameplay is a little bit hard to kind of pick up of what's going on. But it kind of feels like, and again, visually it's kind of hard to see it. It looks great, don't get me wrong, but because it's like quick snippets of the scenes and stuff like that, it's more Devil May Cry style, which is not a bad thing because a lot of people love Devil May Cry 5. But to put that style of combat into a Final Fantasy game, keep in mind, for years we've had this traditional turn-based system, and so with Final Fantasy 15 going fully action-based, and it's basically a traditional action-based RPG. Then we get Final Fantasy 16, and it's more, and I say this word, but just try to keep in mind of where we're going with this, it's more arcadey rather than an actual regular RPG normally would feel. And I don't know how far it will get from its normal roots, but we're going to see a major shift from where we're used to seeing a Final Fantasy game. We're going to see a major shift from traditional, somewhat stylized RPG to a complete overhaul direction of where Final Fantasy is going to be going. And it could just be 16. It could just be 16. And it could be because of how I'm seeing the cutscenes, how I'm seeing the gameplay trailer and stuff like that. It could be just that. But I don't know. I feel like that's kind of what's going on right now. But and this is another one. The summons. The summons play a big different role than what they had in previous Final Fantasy games. Admittedly, Final Fantasy 15 took the biggest difference. Instead of summoning them through magic or whatever, they're being summoned to aid you if you were to fall in battle and stuff like that. So it was a different direction entirely. This one is another different direction altogether. You're not summoning them, but you're summoning their power to fight other summons. So from what I figured, the main character can summon Infant, or more or less the precise term should be he becomes Infant. He transforms into Infant. He embodies Infant, which is interesting. And then we see other characters transform into these other summons as well. And it's like, what? So in other words, you're fighting individual summons as Infant. And I'm like, this could be really, really exciting, or it could fall flat. Now, I'm not saying it could be bad. The way that they could do it, it could be good. But again, because of how it's like cut in terms for the trailer and stuff like that, it's hard to tell what it's going to be. And I mentioned this on Twitter. It feels like the summon fights in 16, it feels like it's going to be like .hack GU epitaph battles. If you're not familiar, in .hack GU, you have two forms of gameplay. You have your base combat gameplay, and then whenever the main character, Haseo, transforms into his epitaph, whether it's fighting one of the Ida viruses or fighting one of the epitaph users, he transforms into his epitaph form, which is Skate. And I feel like I'm seeing that same gameplay style. I'm seeing that same way where you transform into Infant and you're fighting summons like Bahamut, Phoenix, Ramna, all these other ones. And it's like, wow, that might be cool. It's hard to tell because of how the trailer is placed. Again, I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just saying because of how it's placed in the trailer, how they cut it and edit it and stuff, I can't get a clear vision of what I'm seeing. But I am excited for it. I do like what I'm seeing. I may not have a clear visual idea of what it could be, but it looks good. It does look good. I do get excited every time I think back to it. But I can't help but feel like there's something I'm not seeing. You know what I mean? Like there's something that I'm not clearly seeing 100%, you know? Like if there was a way that they could make an unedited visual of gameplay, both in terms of the exploration, the combat, and then the summons themselves. If I can get an unedited version of those three parts, then I feel like I could be a little bit more rested at ease as to like what we could see for Final Fantasy 16. I feel like I would be a little bit more calmer, and I can be like, okay, now I see what can happen. This one's a little bit too mixed up for me to figure out completely what's going on. I get the ideal, but I'm not understanding, you know, visually what is going to happen. You know what I mean? Like, look at the trailer and tell me if you can understand better of what's going on in your mind. You know, like, tell me if you see it better than I do. Chances are you could, but I'm seeing kind of like a mix-up here. Like Devil May Cry combat and then the .hack GU epitaph fight. That's just me. But I'm still excited for 16 regardless. Both this year and next year is going to be wild for a lot of gamers. You know, it's going to be wild for a lot of people. And this is just from Sony. This is just from Sony directly. We still don't know what Microsoft is going to be doing. As of right now, we don't know. And then Nintendo, we don't know right now. I mean, we know Breath of the Wild is on the way. And we know a handful of other games is on the way too. And I wouldn't doubt in my mind if Nintendo reveals another Nintendo Direct this month. Keep in mind, E3 was canceled this year, so there will be another Direct and another Summer of Games event where they will reveal more games that's going to be released for the other games and stuff like that. So it's going to be interesting to see what's going to come out this month. So there'll be more news. I'm sure there will be more news to be talked about. So thank you so much for watching. See you in the next video. Catch you guys later.